Well, hello and welcome to this session today on controlling system behavior. We're going to be looking at how we can use the configuration options within Sage CRM to control much of the environment of Sage CRMs. Certainly, this is the application settings. So what we've looked at so far is in the series of lessons that make up this module really is dealing with everything from email configuration all the way through to setting up document templates. And now we're looking at the general environmental settings, this lesson and the one that follows immediately afterwards. So in this particular session, I want to look at covering the knowledge needed to understand how to use the settings in the system administration area to control the overall system behavior. And this, coupled with the lesson on general settings, is something that you'll see really quite dramatic changes inside the product. I'll be logging on as two different users to show the effect of changing the different options that control system behavior. And so the first thing that I'll do is log on as the system administrator. And I need to obviously get into the administration screens in order to start changing the administration options. And so once I'm there, I'm going to come down into the system menu. So you can see here we're in administration, come down into system, and then within the system area, I'm going to click on system behavior. So here we are on administration, system behavior, and looking at a group of fields, which there must be about 40 on the screen, all 40 parameters that control different aspects of Sage CRM. And these range from concerned with system security to general interface settings, such as the configuration of telephone numbers, and indeed how pipeline graphics are displayed. So if we start to think about what we're doing here, is that we're changing aspects of the metadata. Now, metadata is the data about the system. And the system database holds the information around how the interface should be built. Now, very often we're thinking in terms of metadata when it comes to the definition of screen. So we think about where the position of fields on individual screens, the behavior, the sortability, the presence of captions, etc. on columns. So these are the, if you like, the more obvious metadata choices, but in terms of just about everything, including which tables are available and how you connect to a database, these are all configurable options stored in metadata within Sage CRM's own database. And so the screen that we're looking at is all about providing that metadata control of the application to the system administrator. All we have to do is change some settings and the system will change dramatically without the need to use any code. So let's start looking through these fields in turn. Now, the first two fields, use companies and use individuals, are all about the way in which we can orient Sage CRM for use around either business to business or business to consumer. And the two options specifically, when you've got use companies, specifies whether you want to use companies in Sage CRM, and use persons, or use individuals, I should say, specifies whether or not you want to use individuals in Sage CRM. Now, turning off companies would mean that you're entirely focused on business to consumer. And if you decide not to allow individuals, well, what that means is that you're not going to allow persons to be created without any link into a parental company. Now you can see that I've just opened up a new tab. Now you'll notice that I'm on a different tab to the administrator tab, and so I've logged on as a user and I'm in the process of using the new person screen to create a new person. Now you can see that at the top of the screen it's reminding me with a coaching caption that this is a pre-entry duplication check that's taking place. This is one of the settings controlled by the system behavior. The deduplication check has found existing records with the person's same last name. But if I press on and choose to ignore the warning, what happens here is that you can see that it's allowing me to associate the new person with an existing company. Now I can use that little search company field to go and look up. So I am creating a company field, but there's no obligation for me to link it to a company. This screen allows a user to create individuals unlinked to any company. So it's not mandatory. But if I was to change the use individuals parameter inside that system behavior screen, if I change use individuals to no, then instead a user would see a screen that's different. So here, this version of the screen shows that it's no longer possible to create a person as an individual. A person record must always be linked to companies. And so this is one of the things that you can do in terms of setting up, deciding how you want to work with the concept of individuals and who are unlinked to a company. So you're going business to consumer, or whether you're only configuring Sage CRM to work with business to business. Now, the next option to consider is dashboard enabled, and this specifies whether the interactive dashboard is available to all users. This is a global setting, so it will have a really dramatic effect on the system. So turning off dashboards so that the interactive dashboards are not available to users has an immediate and profound effect through the entire system. You can see here that the default option is the calendar when the dashboards are switched off, and you can see that the dashboard option has also been removed from the My CRM menu. Now, the next set of fields, really, it's you've got there, I've listed out 4 fields and grouped them together conceptually, is because these are fields that govern aspects of system security. Now, I will be covering system security in other lessons in some detail, but I want to explain a little bit more about them here. So allow external URLs in website gadgets, the one that is on the top right. This is a checkbox that allows you to decide whether or not you want external URLs used within website gadgets to actually point to resources outside of the server. So if you don't check it, then it can only access web page gadgets which have their page on the same server. But if you do check it, you can go out to, for example, news sites and other resources. But the difficulty with this is that there is a sense that you would leave yourselves potentially open to malicious action. So that's why this is a security element to decide whether or not this is something that you want to adopt. Now, other security settings that we can see here, the use browser session security allows you to control whether or not users can connect to their current Sage CRM session by using the same SID and the URL, the same path, on a different computer. Now, if it's yes, it prevents users from connecting. If they've got all of the credentials, if, for example, they've intercepted the SID from somewhere, from spoofing in. So yes is the default and recommended. No allows a user to connect to a Sage CRM session just by using the SID and the URL, and there's no check to see whether or not you are actually guarded at this point. And there are other checks as well here around XSL, cross-site scripting to prevent malicious action as well within scripts. And so the filter is all about making sure that if you are using filtering, then the elements are going to be filtered out. So this is all about making sure that illegal or potentially dangerous things, rather than illegal, dangerous things, are not going to cause us a problem. There are 6 fields here that are concerned with how telephone fields are handled generally inside Sage CRM, from not only the presentation of a telephone number and the recording of a telephone number but also then how it moves on to click to dial. So for example, external dial prefix sets the prefix that users in your organization would have to dial in order to gain access to an outside telephone line and then call the external telephone number. And so different exchanges would interpret that somewhat differently. If the click to dials all work on the basis of the tel pseudo URL, and so tel telephone number, if you've got a 9 in there, it would tell the telephony service that you are starting to dial out beyond the network. The other fields that we see here about use area code, use country code, and the default area code and the default country code, these are all to do with the presentation of telephone numbers inside the system. So if we are working with the use area code and use country code, these are the components of the email. So if I step over into the next slide, you can actually see this in action. So you've got the sense that we've got the country code, the area code, as well as the telephone number in here. And in the top content, this is where the telephone number would be, is that if you had chosen to add in the external dialing code, that would also affect the URL that was present or converted into a tel pseudo URL for the telephone number, which would kick off the telephone service that you have associated with your browser. Now, if we continue thinking about what else we've got inside the system, you can see that in the way in which I'm working, I am working with UK English as the language here. And this is my default language for the system. And it is something that when you're creating users, you can create your new users for a system with whatever language is configured inside Sage CRM. But if you have specified a default language for the system, that's what a new user would assume that they are going to be using. So that's if you like, it becomes the default for the new users as well, that can then be overridden as they're set up. Now, it also provides the baseline captions if a translation is missing anything. So if you've got, for example, you've implemented Dutch within the interface and you've used a partial language pack to provide sets of Dutch translations for the interface, if there were areas of the application that were untranslated, rather than present the raw caption code, it would present the English as the default it would present the English as the base language before the user's own preferences were displayed. That's just simply in the hierarchy of the languages. But let's come into here and start to see what we're doing inside this. Oh, there is a nice little thing here. Do you see how we have got the logon here? If we've changed a particular language, the language that is the base language is what is presented on the user screen unless it's told otherwise. So here, for example, I'm just going into the path for CRM / in eWare DLL. And because the base language has been set to German, it's serving up German at this point. But coming back into our system, I want to consider next the idea of deduplication. Deduplication is something that we will look at later on, because there are some areas of the product called match rules, which are really to do with how deduplication works. So I am going to be returning to this in another short lesson in a little while. But deduplication specifies whether or not it is to be used at all. And this is across the entities of lead, company, and person. And there's a whole set of set of how they interact with inside the system guide. So I would encourage you to have a look at the system administration guide and understand the interplay between using the idea of not only deduplication, but the deduplication rule, whether it's and or, because those two options look at how checks are made to deduplicate across a company, a person, and a lead. And that just requires a little bit of thought so you understand, especially if you are capturing a lot of lead information in an existing database that has got a lot of company information and person information. But there are other lessons that will explore deduplication and the match rules coming up a little bit later on in the series of training that we're recording. So watch out for those. Now here in its action, you can see that I'm now looking at a new company screen. Now, I happen to have this with deduplication switched on. You can see that it says new company. I've come into this. This screen will let you check to see whether the company already exists. So this is a search screen that we're looking at. But if I turn it off, instead of going into this pre-entry check, instead I go straight in. So there's no pre-entry search for existing companies, persons, or leads. Bang, we're going straight in with the assumption that we are going to be entering straight away. That way is a good way in which you can end up with lots of duplicates within your system, and I strongly advise actually using deduplication checks within your system environment. The detect duplicate emails is a little different. It specifies whether or not you're going to prevent users from creating person, company, or lead records with duplicate email addresses. Now, when this option is set to yes, if a user is adding or editing a person, company, or lead record and tries to assign an email that is already used by another record of the same type into the system, an error occurs. What this basically means is you can't have people sharing the same email address. So you have to think in terms of this is another alternative unique identifier for a company or for a person. So a person, a company, or a lead record, you can have them. You can have the same address being used for the company, the same address being used for the person, but you can't have it for the same person. Two different people can't have the same email address. Now, this is something that we talk a lot about when it comes to the integration with MailChimp, because the concept of a subscriber within an email system and many other systems is focused on the email address as a unique identifier for that contact. And if you were integrating with something else as well, you'll find that this concept of the email address being required to being unique is a pretty common industry rule. Now, one fun thing here when we come on to communications is that you can set a maximum number of occurrences for the recurring tasks and meetings that a user may want to set up. This value applies to obviously when you're setting up a recurring communications. And here, if we look at where I'm setting up a recurring appointment, you can notice that that's the pattern, but the maximum will be whatever's inside the parameters that you've set within system behavior. So 200 is the default. Another interesting thing is the refresh intervals. Lots of people don't use these because there is a performance consideration, but it becomes very useful in areas where it pays to be reacting very quickly. So, for example, you may want to make sure that you have listings around opportunities, for example, being refreshed very quickly, especially if there are aspects of automation that pushes opportunities into the system that need then to be acted on very, very quickly. So if you were integrated with a tendering site, for example, with a custom integration, and it was pulling in information as an opportunity, you'd want to be the first people on the phone, potentially. So the idea of the refresh intervals for communications, the opportunity, case, and calendar are to do with the listing pages and how often do they get pulled back. Now, if it's 0, it's disabled. So it's never going to refresh. But this is the number of seconds before it is refreshed. And if I look at an example here, this is the calendar refresh interval. You might see a little bit of a flicker there, but this idea is the screen would refresh every X seconds, polling to the server to check if, in this particular case, there are any newly assigned calendar items for the user. Now, this obviously has a resource implication, and you would need to consider the interval and the load this places on the server if you want it to work with inside your system. But it can be, for very specific types of circumstances, a very useful thing, pulling in and informing people that something new has happened that they need to take advantage of very, very quickly. Next, we can consider the pipeline chart style, and this is all about setting the style of the pipeline to whether, and the two options here are rectangle and cylinder, and then you've also got the option whether or not you want to show the pipeline for companies and people, and that's whether or not you want it to be shown when you're looking at the opportunity and case pages at the level of the company and people, rather than at the my CRM opportunities list or the team CRM opportunities list. So let's have a look at what we mean by that. So if I look here, this shows an opportunities list in the company context, and there's no pipeline that's been included here. But if I were to change that setting straight away, this is how it will appear when pipelines are switched on for companies and persons. And you can see that I'm in the context of Gatecom, and I'm in the It's tab menus rather than in the My CRM. So I've got now this. And if I was to change the style to the cylinder style, this is how the pipeline is shown. Now, please note that there are some options about how and where the pipeline is shown also set within the user preferences. And so user preferences would also apply at this point as well. Now, the company notes tab is where you're coming along and writing information at the level of the company. And obviously you have a notes tab at the level of the person as well. And this is just to say, is if you've put a note associated with a person, does it roll up to the company as well? And this is down to the nature of the way in which we present things like the ad hoc type ad hoc descriptive information that notes contain. So the two options are, if you've placed any notes into the person, do you want it to roll up to the company as well? So that's the two options, just company or company and person notes. The next thing is to look at the idea of coaching inside Sage CRM. And this is whether or not you want to make on-screen coaching available to all users. The users themselves can decide whether or not they like it or dislike it in terms of coaching. If you want to think about what coaching is, you can see here on the company screen, I've got a coaching caption running across the top there. So the coaching caption is providing a hint or a tip on how to use this screen and what this screen is for. It's a part of the it's part of the tools that allow Sage CRM to be adopted pretty rapidly, and these are all stored in customization in translations and could be changed by a company to provide additional information at this point. Now, individuals can choose to minimize or switch off coaching captions for themselves, but you could make a decision as a system administrator simply to go without coaching captions completely throughout the system for all users as well. So bang, it's gone now, and it's not present inside the company screen. If we go back looking at the next option within inside the system behavior, we see an idea of the mass operations. Now, mass operations are the types of behavior that we want to carry out potentially against a group of records. So that's where we're carrying out a bulk delete or a bulk update, or we're carrying out a reallocation of records to a new territory. So if you want to allow the system administrator to do this, and you have to be an administrator to carry out those tasks, you can set that option to yes in order to perform those bulk actions or mass actions. So this adds options, as you can see, on the right-hand side of a group screen, but this behavior is only applicable to system administrators. It's not info managers or general users. So you're still preserving a certain amount of trust inside your system. Now, coming back into the parameter screen, we have the option whether or not we're using Exchange integration here. Set yes to be able to start doing the work, and no if you're not. Well, obviously, it's a no here. But this is something that is very clearly related to a large feature inside Sage CRM, which is Exchange integration. And we've got several lessons that cover the configuration and operation of Exchange integration. Look out for those new ones. Now, the next options are the recent list length and the search select advanced fields grid size. These, as you can see here, currently 40 and 50. The maximum value is for the recent list is 40. So the default is the maximum. But we also have another option around the system default theme. And if you're working with a new install, you can only use the contemporary theme. And I expect in future this particular option to disappear. Currently, it's present within 2024 R1 and probably will be in 2024 R2. But at some point, this option will disappear because we've now provided an alternative mechanism for overriding a theme. But let's see this in action, see what we mean by this. So if I have a look at what's going on in here, you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, we're showing the length of the search select advanced. It was limited to 50 records, but you can see that what happens if you have got a lookup to another table within the search select, which returns more than 50 rows, you'll see it says too many records coming back. And on the right-hand side, that's the amount of records, which is the maximum 40 within the recent list as well. And again, everything within the current theme, which is the contemporary theme. Other options that we can see here is to do with the CSV file export delimiter. This is the default. This is for when we're exporting anything from searches and groups and reports to whether we're importing as well. So this is the default option that we're specifying for the export and the import of rows. It is overridden within the user preferences as well. So this is something that we can set for the system, but the users can make their own preference as well. The other fields that we see here are to do with the time zone that we're in and the server relationship that we have. So the server time zone is something that we have to get right. Obviously, we're on a system that is using Windows, is using and connecting through to a database as well. And we have to make sure that our internal clock, our internal setting matches the time zone for the items that we're connecting to. So it has to be integrity that say we're in the right time zone, so that when we're communicating with anything inside Exchange integration or to the database, there isn't an error in transference of the data. So this is all about setting the time zone for the Sage CRM server and picking the right time zone out of the 75 that are available. You have to make sure that the time zone that you pick corresponds exactly to the settings that IIS is expecting to use. So the other thing is to do with the internal requirements to use the actual or internal requests to use the actual server name. So this allows you to specify a Sage CRM server name to use internal requests. If you're doing that, say yes, then it will specify the server name that you're using. No, then you can use you can customize the server name that you're using. And it's really to do with the communications from when you're carrying out the mail merge, carrying out data upload, any of the internal communications, especially between the architecture of the eWare DLL and the Java-based application hierarchy architecture, I should say, within Sage CRM. I've covered that in some discussions on training around the architecture of Sage CRM. Have a look on the Sage training and support website, and you'll see that there's a good lesson on the architecture and explaining the differences or what bits of the product is responsible for carrying out which function. Now, I'm coming to the end. We've got the last couple of things to point out to you here. This is the page URL and the homepage URL and the tags. The home is quite a nice little one. If you put something in here, a URL, literally, this is something that allows you to send users off to wherever. So if we click on that, in this particular case, it would send us off to a Sage website, and you'll notice I'm using tags on this particular company record, and you can see that the tags are present within the system. This just about wraps up what I wanted to talk about in terms of those system behavior, and it sets a scene now for us to go on and deal with the next lesson, which is the general system settings. But let's see if anyone's got any questions. Thank you and goodbye.